All right, so picture this with me. We're in Bengaluru, day 2 of the first test. Overcast skies. And then you glance at the scoreboard and what do you see? 46. And no, that's not a typo. Team India, playing at home, bowled out for just 46 runs. Crazy, right?
Definitely not what anyone envisioned, especially not from a team that's basically unbeatable on home turf.
I mean, yeah, this wasn't just any loss. You guys asked us to deep dive into this one, and for good reason.
It's historically bad. Like, we're
Okay.
talking their lowest ever score in India,
Wow.
and their third lowest ever, period.
We're talking about a team known for their batting, playing on a pitch they should know by heart. So how do we even begin to unpack this?
Well, the match report is actually a good place to start.
Yeah.
It breaks down how this all went down, step by painful step.
Okay, so walk us through it.
In a nutshell,
Mm.
New Zealand seamers came to play. Matt Henry, especially.
Matt Henry. 5 wickets for 15 runs, an absolute game changer.
Absolutely career-defining stuff.
What did the analysis say about his performance? What made him so effective?
All right, so this is where things get interesting. It's bigger than just one bowler having a good day. You see, the pitch, even after being undercover, it didn't play how anyone expected. And Henry, he was able to use this to his advantage. Hitting that sweet spot, cricket fans call it a good length, where the ball bounces just right.
Okay.
And the seam, you know, that slightly raised stitching on the ball,
Yeah.
that comes into play. It made the ball move just enough off the bounce to keep the Indian batsman guessing. 5 wickets for Henry and his 100th test wicket overall.
100th wicket. That's incredible. I also remember that you sent over Rohit Sharma's post-match comments, and he owned up to it, didn't he?
Oh yeah, he did not hold back. Called it a misjudgment of the pitch.
And that's such a huge point, right? Because it feels like that misjudgment exposed a blind spot for India.
Totally. Think about it. They went in with 3 spinners, which is usually a no-brainer on drier Indian pitches. But this time, well, we saw what happened.
It's almost like they had this completely different match in mind, right?
Exactly. Like they had a script for a dry, spin-friendly pitch, and they tried to stick to it even when it was obvious that the conditions were calling for something totally different. It's kind of like they overestimated their home advantage a little bit, you know, underestimated the conditions and New Zealand's ability to, you know, make the most of it.
And this is where I think the Kuldeep Yadav gamble comes in, right? You flag this in your notes. They brought him in for his ability to take wickets on those flatter, drier pitches, the kind they thought they were going to get.
Exactly. Bringing in Kuldeep was always a bit of a gamble, right?
Yeah.
They've been banking on a specific kind of pitch that would really let him shine. But as we've established, it didn't quite pan out that way.
It didn't.
And then you add in those early dismissals, starting with Rohit himself, and suddenly India is playing catch-up, which just puts more and more pressure on everyone else in the lineup.
It really makes you wonder, you know, if Rohit could go back knowing what we know now, would he make the same call? Obviously, hindsight's 20/20, but still. The pressure on a captain, especially a captain like Rohit, it's got to be immense.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much riding on those early decisions a captain makes. It's almost like a chess game, you know what I mean? You got to be thinking several moves ahead, trying to anticipate not just the current situation, but how your opponent might respond to what you do. It seems like Rohit might have miscalculated some of those early moves.
And while we're on the topic of miscalculations, we got to talk about Virat Kohli being moved to number 3. You send over his stats, and let's just say he hasn't batted at number 3 since 2016, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, that was definitely a head-scratcher. What was the thinking there? I think you mentioned they were trying not to disrupt KL Rahul's momentum, given how well he's been doing at number 6.
Right, exactly. It's like Rohit didn't want to mess with a good thing, you know. Rahul was finding his groove lower down the order, but then moving Kohli up, it meant exposing him to the new ball, those tricky early conditions. And Kohli, we know he's a rock in the middle order, known for his composure, not exactly the ideal situation for him.
And then he gets a duck. Out on 12 balls. Just added insult to injury at that point. It really does make you think, though. What if they had put someone like, say, KL Rahul as opener? He's got centuries in England, Australia, South Africa. The guy's used to facing the new ball in some seriously challenging conditions.
Yeah.
Hindsight's 20/20, but yeah, it's an interesting thought.
It just shows how much weight these decisions have. Every single move a captain makes has these ripple effects, right?
No.
And in this case, that Kohli move, it just didn't work out. It almost makes me think of that saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, Rahul was doing well. Maybe they should have just stuck with what was working.
Yeah, there's a strong argument to be made for that. And I think this match has really sparked a lot of debate about India's whole approach here. especially because they've had so much recent success in England. I mean, back in 2021, they were playing this aggressive counterattacking style, even on pitches that were seamer-friendly, and it worked. But this match, it showed us what happens when that approach doesn't work.
Right, so they come into this match trying to impose that same aggressive style, but the conditions are completely different.
Exactly. A bunch of the Indian batsmen went for those big shots early on, almost like they were trying to dictate the pace of the game instead of, building a solid foundation.
Yeah.
But against a bowling attack as disciplined as New Zealand's on a pitch that just wasn't conducive to that style of play, it ended up being their downfall.
Which brings us back to adaptability, right? Knowing when to stick to your strengths and when to just, read the room and adjust your strategy. It's a lesson that goes way beyond cricket, if you ask me.
Totally. And, we can't forget, this Indian team is stacked with experienced players, world-class talent. They've bounced back from some tough situations before. But what I'm really curious about is how this match, especially that first innings collapse, how it affects their mindset going forward.
Right.
Do they stick to their guns, double down, and trust their natural game? Or do they make some changes?
Well, that is the million-dollar question. New Zealand ended day 2 with a pretty substantial lead, so I don't know. What's your read on the situation?
Okay, so on paper, New Zealand's in the driver's seat. They've got a healthy lead. The pitch is still doing a few things for the bowlers. But as anyone who follows cricket knows, it's a game full of twists and turns. Never say never, right?
That's the beauty of Test cricket. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And even though India had kind of a rough start, you can never count them out entirely.
Couldn't agree more. It's not over till it's over. If they can somehow just put that first innings debacle behind them, come out with a bat, put up a big score, I mean, anything is possible. It all comes down to how they respond to this. This match has become a real test of character for Team India.
It's moments like these that really expose a team's character, don't you think? To be able to come back from something like that.
It's the ultimate test,
Yeah.
right? How resilient are you, really? And we've seen it go both ways with India recently, those amazing come-from-behind wins, but then also times when they just couldn't recover.
And I bet Rohit Sharma is going over every single decision he made in that match, thinking, what if I had done this differently? That's the thing about captaincy, though, isn't it? You're constantly learning and adapting.
No doubt about it. Making those split-second decisions with all that pressure, often without all the information you'd ideally want, and then you've got to live with the consequences. It's all about trusting your instincts, learning from your mistakes, and finding ways to improve.
One thing that really jumped out from the analysis, and you pointed this out in your notes, was how caught off guard India seemed by the conditions. Almost like they went in with this fixed idea about how the pitch would play, and when it didn't pan out that way, they just, I don't know, they froze up a bit.
Yeah, that's a really astute observation, and I think it highlights a potential trap for teams that are used to playing in familiar conditions. It's like showing up for an exam, having memorized all the answers from last year's test, but then getting in there and realizing they've changed all the questions.
A cricket test match with a few curveballs thrown in.
Exactly. And just like in any test, you've got to be ready for the unexpected, think on your feet, adapt your approach. Rote memorization will only get you so far. You need to really understand the underlying principles at play.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this dramatic test match, what's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to remember? What's the big lesson here?
Adaptability.
Yeah.
That's the key. It's a lesson that goes way beyond the cricket pitch, honestly. Whether you're facing a tough opponent in a match or just navigating the ups and downs of life, being able to read the situation, adjust your game plan, be comfortable with a little uncertainty, that's what sets you up for success.
It's about having a plan but being flexible enough to toss it out the window when things change. Because sometimes the best move is the one you didn't see coming. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder that. This has been our deep dive into the India versus New Zealand test match.